It is an almost green screen as stocks react to Trump's 90-day pause on tariffs after a trading holiday on Thursday. Metals and consumer durables are the biggest gainers. TCS misses the mark on revenue and margins as decision-making slows on Trump's trade tattle. The management points to some ramp downs, but no cancellations, and remains hopeful of a better FY26 on the back of a strong order book. Tata Steel plans a significant transformation of its Dutch operations to improve competitiveness. The proposal involving a workforce reduction will be implemented post-consultation with key stakeholders. The stock gains on this news. The US court lifts the injunction on Sun Pharma's drug launch. Cipla gets a US FDA's approval to sell a cancer drug, while Biocon's biologics arm has received the go-ahead to sell a $2 billion biosimilar cancer drug in the United States. The stocks perk up. RBI issues guidelines for gold loan that clearly define these loans, set out loan value limits and cap exposures of lenders. The guidelines aimed at addressing risk in segments are seen crimping growth for players like Muthoot Finance. Hello, good afternoon. You've tuned into Business Lunch, coming live from CNBC-TV18 Motilal Oswal Studios. I'm Vinny Motiwala, and thank you so much for tuning in as always. A good Friday coming in for all the markets today, and Nifty as of now also is managing to hold on to gains of almost 2% that we're seeing in this trading session. 2.26% days highest point, 22,900 is what the Nifty is at, up 500 points in today's day. Contributors, we have seen the private banks are cut at HDFC Bank, ICICI Bank, Reliance, Bharti Airtel among the other names that are buzzing in trade. On the flip side, you have Asian Paints and Apollo Hospitals in the Nifty, which are a bit of a drag coming in. But surely, Nifty Bank, that's the one we should pull up as well, right? Private banks are doing well. Nifty Bank also trading at the day's highest point. Almost 2% gain is what we're seeing coming in for the Nifty Bank. Nifty Mid and Small Cap managing to hold on to good gains as well, in line with what the benchmark indices are doing. Both up almost 2%, small cap 2.6% uptick there as well. So yes, interesting move coming in the market. All sectors today are holding on to the green today, so no red from the sector point of view. But especially metals and pharmas as well as consumer durables are among the top performers in terms of sector-wise and sector gains coming in. So yes, that's what we're seeing coming in for the markets. But let's start by talking about earnings, right? And shift that focus to the earnings season that has started. Kick-started with TCS that reported its Q4 numbers yesterday. Now, there was a mild miss that came in on that front. The company's net profit missed their estimates, 1.3% lower on a sequential basis. Revenue also came in below the street expectation, while revenue in dollar terms, US dollar terms, that declined by 1% on a sequential basis. To understand whether the recently imposed tariffs had impacted this quarter, let's listen in to the conversation that we had with them. Rima and Prashant were in talks with the management. So what did they have to say on that front? Listen in.
Many of our customers are also in a wait and watch mode in terms of what is the end game going to be. But good thing is, whatever we are seeing so far, as much as the rhetoric, we have not seen our customers panic. There are maybe some programs what we thought that they would kick off, but some delays in decision making. But we are not seeing any major cancellations or no major project ramp downs. There are few, but no major. So I don't think there is any major negative reaction. Have I seen any major budget cuts? I have not seen any major budget cuts. I have not seen any major project cancellations. There are some tactical ramp downs here and there, but I won't panic at this time.
And switching gears, the Reserve Bank of India has issued draft rules on loan against gold. Ritu is joining in with us to give us more details on this one.
Well, the takeaway is that the draft norms are not as bad as feared, although there could be some near-term impact. Now, there are single borrower sectoral limits that have been set. Lenders are barred from lending against financial assets or gold ETFs, repledge loans. Now, in the case of bullet repayment consumption loans, the tenor is also proposed to be capped at 12 months. The draft rules also say that gold should be valued based on 22-carat purity only, and the pledged ornaments should not exceed a kg per borrower. Now, here's where the pain really lies. The loan-to-value or LTV ratio, while that remains capped at 75%, here's the change. This 75% LTV must be maintained throughout the tenure of the loan, which previously was only applicable to banks, and this is now for NBFCs as well. For bullet repayment loans, the LTV will now have to be calculated on the total amount, that is principal plus interest. So the origination LTV may decline given the buffers that lenders will be required to keep for gold price fluctuations and interest payments. Now, if this LTV ratio breach continues for more than 30 days, there will also be an additional 1% standard asset provisioning on the entire outstanding amount. So RBI is trying to harmonize these rules, but really what it does is eliminate some of the NBFC arbitrage over banks, and so the worry is that this could reduce customer preference for NBFCs. Now, brokerages believe the LTV cap could affect loan growth in the year immediately after implementation, but overall it's a better outcome than initially feared, because markets, for instance, were fearing that bullet loans will be discontinued. Morgan Stanley says Muthoot's counter-cyclical business could ensure strong earnings versus other NBFCs, and estimates ROE of 20% in FY26 and 18% in the next year, even if the AUM is flat. Jefferies believes tighter norms can have some impact on growth and provisioning. CLSA says these guidelines are marginally disruptive for growth for Muthoot and Manappuram, and it is only building in 12 to 15% loan growth over the next couple of years.
Okay, Ritu, thank you so much for that. But on that note, we're going to slip into a very short break. When we return, we'll get you the tariff-related updates on the other side. Welcome back to Business Lunch on CNBC-TV18. Now, let's move on. In Asian stocks, they were struggling to stay up in trade, and this is despite US President Donald Trump's 90-day pause in reciprocal tariffs. CNBC's JP Ong is bringing us more details on this one.
The recent bounce back for Asian markets was short-lived, with stocks across the region mostly in retreat a day after US President Donald Trump decided to suspend reciprocal tariffs for 90 days. And after the euphoria that boosted markets on Thursday cooled, investors were reminded that tariffs on Chinese goods were still in place and are now effectively at 145%, stoking worries about new retaliation from Beijing. Bonds sold off and the US dollar slid overnight on recession worries, and that boosted the Japanese yen, which was already drawing strength from overall flight to safety. That stronger yen also weighed on the Nikkei 225, which closed out a week that saw the Tokyo benchmark swing between sharp losses and gains. Surprisingly, stocks across Greater China rose despite the rising tariffs levied by the US. Equities in Shanghai and Hong Kong came back from early losses, signs that state funds may be supporting the stock market once more. The yuan steadied as well, a day after it tested its weakest levels since 2007. Elsewhere, the mood across Asia-Pacific was mostly muted, with stocks in South Korea and Australia in retreat. But Taiwan's TAIEX looked unusually strong, with the island's president Lai Ching-te claiming that they will be among the first to conduct tariff negotiations with the United States. For CNBC International, I'm JP Ong.
Thank you so much for that. Now, staying with Asia, even as Trump hikes tariffs on China, brokerage firms like Goldman Sachs have held onto the overweight view on China. Let's listen into Sunil Kaul of Goldman Sachs on what he had to say and why is he believing such a statement that he's making.
Sharp increase in the tariffs and the retaliation, the 145% number, that does have impact on the market. That does have impact on the growth as well. I mean, in fact, if you look at our numbers, we just recently cut China's GDP growth number by 50 basis points, both in calendar 2025 and 2026. So we are now looking at China's growth to slow down to from 4.5% to 4% this year, and from 4% to 3.5% this year. So clearly, I think these high tariff numbers are having are weighing on activity and growth. But at the margin, I think the policy is also going to be incrementally more supportive, and we do think that some of this impact from tariffs is going to be offset by policy stimulus.
And meanwhile, European Union is preparing retaliatory measures against Donald Trump's tariffs, and these could come into effect if no agreement takes place with Washington. Remember, after the White House paused tariffs for 90 days, the EU has also decided to put its countermeasures on hold. Let's go across to CNBC's Sylvia Amaro, who's here to give us more details on this one.
The European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen has warned the EU is preparing retaliatory measures to the US tariffs, which could be deployed if no agreement is reached with Washington. She said the measures could include levies on digital advertising revenues, which would hit big tech names such as Meta and Google. In an interview with the Financial Times, von der Leyen reiterated the bloc is seeking a completely balanced agreement with the US, but said there are a wide range of potential countermeasures. And here, first and foremost, very interesting to get this interview from von der Leyen because she barely gives interviews. So now she comes out and she's talking about the EU's position amid these trade tariffs. And she's very clear in her message. We want a deal, but we are ready to retaliate if needed. And we are going to hit big tech because we know that's where we could hit the United States the most. So they have all possible solutions on the table at this stage. They remain flexible. However, they also yesterday announced that they were pausing their retaliatory tariffs for 90 days, again, as a sign to the U.S. that they are willing to negotiate, that they want to find some sort of compromise. But ultimately, her position is we have all the tools that we want in order to retaliate, and they will use them. So let's see how these conversations will unfold, Karen. But at this stage, it seems that it is very much in the open whether the EU will manage to strike a deal with Donald Trump.
And earlier, we also spoke to Jahangir Aziz, who is the head of emerging market economies at JP Morgan, and he expects recession in the US in the second half of the year. Listen in.
So after the pause, we are still sticking with that, second half of the U.S. will go into recession. That was a baseline prior to the pause. That remains a baseline. For global recession, we still don't have it in a baseline, but we have a 60% probability. We haven't changed that probability.
And First Global's Devina Mehra says that Trump's policy has put an end to U.S. equities outperformance as well as accelerating the end of dollar as a reserve currency. Listen into what more she had to say.
And US has been outperforming for about 12 years. So anyway, I'd been watching that sometime that outperformance would end. If you'd asked me 6 months ago, I would have said that, we are watching, but nothing looks imminent. But I think Trump has hastened the end of the U.S. outperformance. And more than that, whatever U.S. has done has hurt, I think, even on a long-term basis, the U.S. dollar's position as the reserve currency of the world and the trade currency of the world. People will start to look at alternatives. 2 years ago, I made a video saying de-dollarization will not happen in a hurry because reserve currencies don't change in a hurry. But I think Trump has shaken something fundamental about the trust in U.S.
And moving on, the former White House official Lisa Curtis has hit out Trump's tariff policy, calling its rollout haphazard. She also said that Trump's policy could lead to U.S. losing its soft power, paving the way for China's domination. My colleague Parikshit actually spoke with her and began by asking her about the rationale behind the tariffs. Listen in.
Well, I think the goal of the Trump administration is to bring manufacturing back to the United States. This is something that Trump was committed to on the campaign trail. So, it's not surprising that he is putting a lot of effort into bringing manufacturing back, bringing jobs back to the United States. I think the problem is how the tariffs were rolled out, and the fact that not only has he targeted U.S. adversaries, particularly China, but he has also levied tariffs on allies and partners, including some allies that the U.S. had a trade surplus with. So it hasn't made a lot of sense to people why he would do these broad tariffs on so many nations, including allies and partners. And I think it did backfire, and that's why he has stepped back and he's put on this 90-day moratorium. So, you know, unfortunately, I think that the way the tariffs were rolled out, you know, there didn't seem to be a good strategy in place, and it seemed like a haphazard approach to applying tariffs, you know, across the board, across the world. And it badly backfired on him. So there may be, you know, a lesson learned here. But right now, of course, the tariffs are still on with China, and the U.S. and China are virtually in a trade war. And so the question is, how will this impact the U.S. economy? And I think we've yet to see, you know, how it will all play out for the average U.S. consumer.
Right. You know, Lisa, it's quite clear that Donald Trump is using trade as a weapon and trade as a centerpiece of foreign policy relations with other nations. Yes, the tariffs have been paused, and you're saying that it's clear that somewhere the administration realized that the policy is backfiring. But this was long coming. Since his campaign, he has been saying that he will apply reciprocal tariffs, and the world has been very unfair to America. This was in the plan for the last 2 to 3 months. What do you think made the administration realize that, hey, we've made a mistake and we need to pause?
Well, I think one of the main reasons that we're seeing these tariffs in such a, you know, over focus on tariffs, it's really, you know, a one-track strategy. If you ask me, there is probably a broader strategy, a broader economic strategy, if you really want to bring manufacturing back to the United States, that you can't just rely on tariffs. But, you know, unfortunately, I think, you know, his advisors, people like Peter Navarro, who, you know, has been all tariffs all the time, he's written books about it. I think that, you know, he has influenced President Trump. And that's why we saw the disagreement. I think, you know, over the weekend, Elon Musk was very clear that he disagreed with this strategy, and he wanted to see the U.S. negotiating.
Okay, on that note, we're going to slip into a very short break, but don't go anywhere. After the break, we'll get you more news and updates, so stay tuned in. Welcome back to Business Lunch on CNBC TV18. Now, Airbnb, that's seeing a surge in bookings from India, with Goa emerging as the top destination for both domestic as well as international travelers. With Gen Zs and millennials driving demand for experimental travel, Shilpa has filed a report on the same on the short-term rental giant's big India bet.
With a 30% rise in domestic bookings, India is one of Airbnb's fastest growing markets globally. Goa remains the platform's top destination not only for Indian travelers but also for international guests. Gen Z travelers are looking beyond hotels and traditional holidays. They want immersive, cultural and offbeat experiences, and that's where Airbnb is gaining traction.
We are seeing very strong growth, 20% bookings growth year over year in terms of 2024 versus 2023, and we are seeing the same momentum in 2025 as well. 9 out of 10 new bookings that happen on Airbnb are from the Gen Z millennial cohort. In fact, the Gen Z bookings that we've seen, in fact, in the last year have grown by almost 60% year over year. Now, we've seen almost a 30% growth year over year in terms of just domestic nights. And even in the last quarter of last year, Q4, that number was at about 35% year over year. When people stay in homes or lesser known neighborhoods, there is a multiplier effect that comes into play that benefits the entire microeconomy.
The growth for Airbnb comes at a time of heightened competition from new players like Saffron Stays, Stay Vista and similar domestic players. Airbnb says more competition augurs well for the industry and is working on increasing awareness among Indian hosts and guests.
All the players that you mentioned also are on Airbnb. So we are a marketplace, that a lot of young people prefer, and they come on Airbnb to find the best stay for their budget or for their type of travel that they're looking for. Until the time people are traveling more, as what we are seeing in the last few years, or new people are traveling and they are using newer accommodation stays or hosted stays as their preferred method of travel, it's good news for all of us in the industry. So I think Airbnb will continue to lead its way in terms of innovation. In the last 1, 2 or 3 years alone, we've had almost 350 plus upgrades to our service.
With travel patterns shifting post-pandemic and long-stay bookings on the rise, Airbnb is betting on flexible, remote-friendly travel as a long-term trend with a focus on immersive stays, local partnerships and Gen Z preferences. In Mumbai, Shilpa Rani Petau.
Okay, moving on to some more news and updates. Pakistani-Canadian Dr. Tahawoor Rana, who allegedly played a role in the 2008 Mumbai attacks, has and was arrested by the National Investigation Agency after the extradition from the United States. News 18's Arunima is bringing us more on this front.
Questioning has started. Top officers of the National Investigation Team, along with other agencies, are questioning Tahawoor Rana. They want to know essentially how much he knew about Headley's plan and the plan that Headley's handlers had given him. For example, one question that NIA would want Rana to answer is, why did he tell Headley after the 26/11 attack that the attackers must be given Nishan-e-Haider, the highest gallantry award in Pakistan, which is usually given to army men for carrying out acts of valor in the battlefield. Rana had earlier claimed that he was only repeating what Headley had said, but the intercepted call would be played out by NIA in all likelihood, and he would be asked to clarify further. There are 106 emails between Headley and others, including Rana, which also could be utilized to confront him. NIA is building a case that says that Rana was not just an innocent bystander or a friend of Headley who was trying to help him get a visa document. His role was much more deep, much more sinister. His background in Pakistani army is also something that NIA would look at, trying to argue that Rana kept in contact with his Pakistani army colleagues even after he moved to Canada, and it was he who introduced Headley to the Pakistani army officials. So the questioning is going to continue over the next 18 days. There's a very high possibility that Rana could be taken to Mumbai. There is a test identification parade that will be carried out. People who have seen him either in Mumbai at the Immigration Law Center that he carried out, or others who perhaps knew him while he was in India, all of them could be asked to identify Rana in the test identification parade. There is a likelihood that even after the end of the 18-day period, NIA could seek further custody of this 26/11 plotter.
And in some international news updates, a New York City sightseeing helicopter broke apart mid-air and crashed into the Hudson River, killing 6 people, which included 3 children. The victims included a Siemens executive and his family and the pilot. Following the tragic incident, US President Donald Trump wrote on Truth Social that the Secretary of Transportation and his team were looking into the accident and that further details would be announced shortly. And as we wrap up this edition of Business Lunch on CNBC TV18, we leave you with some somber news. Former Vice Chairman of Bajaj Auto, Madhur Bajaj, passed away this morning in Mumbai. Bajaj was currently serving as the director of Bajaj Holdings, Bajaj Finserv and Bajaj Electricals.